Lance Corporal Marcus Williams was 19 years old when he died in my arms. I made him a promise that day.
Sir, at the podium. I need you to step away from the microphone immediately.
I'm sorry, what? I'm giving a speech. Can this wait?
Homeland Security Investigations.
Step away from that.
I need to.
Standing.
Robert Hayes. I'm 71 years old. I served 26 years. This is not necessary.
Sir, you are being detained for investigation. Stop resisting and come
Resisting?
with us peacefully.
You're hurting him.
They ask him to say a few words. Just a few minutes, the ceremony organizer says. Maybe share what Memorial Day means to you. Maybe talk about service. Maybe tell the young people why it matters. Robert Hayes nods, adjusts the Navy Cross on his chest. The ribbon faded, but the medal itself still gleaming after 53 years, and walks slowly to the podium. His cane taps each step across the marble floor of the Veterans Cemetery pavilion. Behind him, 200 folding chairs filled with veterans, families, city officials, all gathered under a cloudless Virginia sky on Memorial Day 2025. In front of him, a microphone, an American flag, and rows of white headstones stretching toward the horizon. He's thinking about his speech, about the men whose names are carved into those stones, about his friend Marcus who didn't make it home from Da Nang. He's not thinking about the two federal agents in dark suits standing at the back of the pavilion, watching him, waiting. He doesn't know they've decided he's suspicious. Doesn't know they've already called for backup. Doesn't know that in exactly 14 minutes, they're going to stop his speech mid-sentence and detain him in front of every person who came to honor the fallen. What happens in those 14 minutes will be captured on 12 different cameras. Will be witnessed by a mayor, 3 city council members, 47 veterans, and a crowd that will go from respectful silence to barely contained fury in the span of 30 seconds. By the time it's over, 2 federal agents will have lost their careers. The Department of Homeland Security will face the largest Memorial Day-related civil rights lawsuit in history, and Robert Hayes, Navy Cross recipient, Vietnam veteran, 71 years old, will have proven that even 50 years of service doesn't protect you when someone decides you look like you don't belong. If you believe Memorial Day means something, if you think military service deserves respect, hit subscribe. Because what Agent David Morrison and his partner did to Robert Hayes while he stood at that podium speaking about sacrifice will show you exactly how cheap those medals become when prejudice wears a badge. Robert Hayes was 71 years old, a retired Navy Master Chief Petty Officer with 26 years of active service. He'd enlisted in 1968 at 18, straight out of high school in Richmond, Virginia. His father had served in Korea, his grandfather in World War II. Military service was family tradition, but for Robert it was also escape, from poverty, from limited options, from a city where young black men had few paths forward. The Navy took him to places he'd never imagined. Vietnam, the Philippines, Japan. Diego Garcia. He'd been a hospital corpsman, serving with Marine units, treating wounds under fire, saving lives while bullets snapped overhead. He'd earned his Navy Cross in 1971 near Quang Tri, running into enemy fire to reach 3 wounded Marines, treating them under sustained attack, calling in medevac while covering them with his own body. One of those Marines survived because of Robert's tourniquets. Another lived because Robert kept pressure on a sucking chest wound for 40 minutes waiting for the helicopter. The third died in Robert's arms, but not before Robert had given him morphine and held his hand and promised to write his mother. The Navy Cross sat in a shadow box in Robert's living room for 40 years. He rarely talked about it, rarely wore it. But when the local veterans organization asked him to speak at the Memorial Day ceremony at Jefferson National Cemetery, they'd specifically requested he wear his decorations. The young people need to see what service looks like, the organizer had said. They need to see that black veterans have always been there, always bled, always sacrificed. So Robert had taken out his dress blues, still fitting after all these years, still sharp and pinned on his ribbons. The Navy Cross, the Purple Heart, the Combat Action Ribbon, 2 bronze stars, the Vietnam Service Medal with 4 campaign stars, 26 years of service displayed on his chest. He'd practiced his speech at home, timing it to 8 minutes. He wanted to talk about Marcus, about the young Marine who died in his arms, about what Memorial Day meant to the men who came back carrying the names of those who didn't. Agent David Morrison and his partner Agent Lisa Crawford were Homeland Security Investigations agents assigned to the Richmond field office. They'd been told to attend the Memorial Day ceremony as part of routine security. A federal cemetery, public officials present, large crowd. Standard protocol. They arrived in dark suits and sunglasses, positioned themselves at the back of the pavilion, and watched the ceremony begin. The invocation, the color guard, the placing of the wreath. Morrison was supposed to be observing the crowd for threats. Instead, he was profiling. When Robert Hayes walked to the podium, Morrison saw an elderly black man in a military uniform and immediately thought, stolen valor. The medals looked too significant. The man looked too old to have earned them. Morrison pulled out his phone and quietly started searching databases, looking for Robert Hayes, trying to verify whether this was legitimate. He found multiple Robert Hayes entries, common name, dozens of matches. Without bothering to filter by age or location or service record, Morrison convinced himself something was wrong. That guy's wearing a Navy cross, Morrison whispered to Crawford. You think that's real? Robert began his speech at 11:23 a.m. His voice was strong despite his age, carrying across the pavilion without strain. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. My name is Robert Hayes. I served 26 years in the Navy as a hospital corpsman. I stand here today to remember the men and women who didn't make it home. Specifically, I want to tell you about Lance Corporal Marcus Williams. The crowd was silent, attentive. Robert spoke about Marcus, 19 years old, from Alabama, who'd talked about his mother's cooking and his girlfriend back home and his plans to become a teacher. He spoke about the firefight that took Marcus's life, about holding him as he died, about the promise Robert made to visit Marcus's grave every year. Memorial Day isn't about barbecues or sales or a long weekend, Robert said, his voice thickening with emotion. It's about remembering that freedom isn't free, that every right we enjoy was purchased with someone's blood, that men like Marcus paid a price we can never fully repay. Morrison wasn't listening to the speech. He was texting his supervisor, asking about protocol for confronting someone suspected of stolen valor. His supervisor texted back, "Are you sure? Don't interrupt a ceremony without solid evidence." Morrison ignored the advice. He'd convinced himself that Robert's uniform was fake, his medal stolen, his entire presence fraudulent. Crawford, who had more experience and better judgment, tried to pull him back. David, wait until after the speech. Let's verify before we do anything. But Morrison was already moving forward, walking down the center aisle between the folding chairs, his hand reaching for his credentials. 200 people turned to look at him. Robert, mid-sentence about sacrifice and memory, paused as he saw the agent approaching. "Excuse me," Morrison called out, his voice cutting across the pavilion. "Sir, I need you to step away from the podium." The silence that followed was absolute. Robert stared at Morrison, confused. The ceremony organizer, a veteran named James Peterson, stood up from his front row seat. "Agent, this is a Memorial Day ceremony. Can this wait?" Morrison ignored him, focused on Robert. "Sir, I'm Homeland Security Investigations. I need to verify your credentials. Step away from the podium now." Robert's confusion turned to something else, not fear, but the particular exhaustion that comes from being questioned about belonging in spaces you've earned. "I'm giving a speech," Robert said carefully. "I was invited to speak. Can this wait 10 minutes until I'm finished?" "No, it can't. I have reason to believe you may be impersonating a military veteran. I need to see identification and proof of service immediately." The words hung in the air like a slap. Around the pavilion, veterans were standing. The mayor of Richmond, seated on the stage, was staring at Morrison in disbelief. James Peterson was moving toward the podium, his face red with anger. "Agent Morrison, Master Chief Hayes is a Navy Cross recipient. He's a decorated combat veteran. You need to stand down right now." Morrison's hand moved to his weapon, not drawing it, but resting on it in a gesture of authority and threat. "Sir, step back. This is a federal investigation." That's when phones started coming out. 47 veterans, their families, the mayor's staff, news photographers covering the ceremony. Everyone pulled out their phones and started recording. 12 different angles capturing the same moment. A federal agent confronting a decorated veteran at a Memorial Day ceremony, demanding proof of service, hand on his weapon. Robert Hayes stood at that podium, his Navy Cross catching the sunlight, and made a decision. He wasn't leaving, wasn't stepping down, wasn't giving this agent the satisfaction of interrupting a speech about men who died for their country. Agent Morrison, I'm 71 years old. I'm a retired Navy Master Chief. I earned every decoration on this uniform in combat. I'm finishing my speech about my friend who died in my arms in Vietnam. And then, if you still want to question my service, I'll provide every piece of documentation you need. But you're going to wait 8 more minutes. The crowd erupted in applause. Not polite ceremony applause, roaring, standing ovation, veterans shouting support. Morrison's face flushed. Crawford was trying to grab his arm, trying to pull him back, hissing, "David, abort. This is a disaster. Stand down." But Morrison had gone too far to back down without looking weak. "Sir, you're coming with me now, or I'll place you under arrest for interfering with a federal investigation." That's when Mayor Patricia Williams stood up from her seat on the stage. She was a black woman, 62 years old, herself a veteran, currently serving her second term as Richmond's mayor. Her voice carried absolute authority. "Agent Morrison, I'm the mayor of this city. Robert Hayes was invited by me personally to speak at this ceremony. He is exactly who he says he is. You will stand down immediately, or I will have city police remove you from the cemetery for disrupting a public ceremony." Morrison turned to face her, his authority challenged by someone with more legitimate power. "Mayor Williams, this is a federal matter. You don't have jurisdiction." Patricia walked down from the stage, moved between Morrison and Robert, and pulled out her own phone. "Then I'm calling the director of Homeland Security, who happens to be a personal friend, and explaining why one of his agents is harassing a Navy Cross recipient on Memorial Day." She hit dial, put the phone on speaker. It rang twice before a secretary answered. "Department of Homeland Security, Director's Office. This is Mayor Patricia Williams of Richmond, Virginia. I need to speak with Director Matthews immediately. It's an emergency regarding an agent disrupting a Memorial Day ceremony and detaining a decorated veteran." The secretary, hearing the words Memorial Day and veteran, put her through immediately. Director Matthews came on the line. "Mayor Williams, what's happening?" Patricia's voice was ice. "Director, I'm at Jefferson National Cemetery. Your agent David Morrison is threatening to arrest Master Chief Robert Hayes, a Navy Cross recipient, for speaking at our Memorial Day ceremony. Master Chief Hayes is in full dress uniform, wearing decorations earned in Vietnam, speaking about fallen service members. Agent Morrison has accused him of stolen valor and is attempting to remove him from the podium in front of 200 witnesses, all of whom are currently recording this." The silence on the line was brief but profound. Then Director Matthews spoke, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Put Agent Morrison on the phone." Patricia handed her phone to Morrison. Morrison took it hesitantly, suddenly realizing how badly this had gone wrong. "Agent Morrison?" The director's voice was sharp. "Yes, sir. Are you detaining a Navy Cross recipient at a Memorial Day ceremony?" Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "Sir, I had reason to believe. I asked you a yes or no question. Are you detaining a decorated veteran during a Memorial Day speech?" "I was verifying his credentials, sir." "Did you check the National Veteran Database before approaching him? Did you confirm his service record? Did you verify with the ceremony organizers? Did you do any actual investigation before interrupting a Memorial Day ceremony?" Silence. Then, "No, sir. Give the mayor back her phone, apologize to Master Chief Hayes, and remove yourself from that cemetery immediately. Consider yourself suspended pending investigation. I'll be reviewing footage of this incident within the hour." Morrison handed the phone back to Patricia, his face ashen. He looked at Robert, standing at the podium still, the Navy Cross still gleaming on his chest, and managed to stiff "My apologies, Master Chief." The words were hollow, forced, meaningless. Robert didn't acknowledge them. Morrison and Crawford left the pavilion to scattered boos and shouts from the crowd. When they were gone, Robert Hayes turned back to the microphone. The pavilion fell silent again, waiting. Robert's hands were shaking slightly, from anger, from adrenaline, from the exhaustion of being disbelieved in a space where his service should have been unquestionable. "As I was saying," Robert continued, his voice steady despite everything, "Lance Corporal Marcus Williams was 19 years old when he died in my arms. I made him a promise that day. I promised I would remember him. I promised I would honor his sacrifice. And I promised I would tell anyone who would listen that freedom isn't free." He finished his speech, all 8 minutes of it, to a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Veterans were crying. The mayor was crying. James Peterson stepped to the podium after Robert finished and said simply, "Master Chief Hayes, we are honored by your service and ashamed of what just happened. On behalf of this city and every veteran here, thank you." The lawsuit was filed 6 weeks later. Robert Hayes versus United States, Department of Homeland Security, David Morrison and Lisa Crawford. The complaint was devastating. Violation of First Amendment rights, disruption of protected speech. Violation of Fourth Amendment rights, detention without cause. Age discrimination, racial profiling. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. False accusation of stolen valor. Defamation. And something Morrison hadn't considered, violation of federal law protecting veterans from harassment based on their service. The evidence was overwhelming. 12 video angles from phones and cameras. The mayor's testimony. The cemetery organizer's testimony. The director of Homeland Security's phone call, recorded by the mayor. Robert's complete service record, 26 years, Navy Cross citation, Purple Heart documentation, honorable discharge papers. Morrison's own text messages showing he'd acted without verification. And the public nature of it, 200 witnesses, Memorial Day ceremony, a veteran in full dress uniform speaking about fallen comrades. The trial happened 19 months later. The courtroom was packed daily with veterans in uniform, filling the gallery in solidarity. The jury watched all 12 video angles. They heard Robert's speech interrupted. They saw Morrison's hand on his weapon. They heard the mayor's intervention. They listened to the phone call with the director. Robert testified about his service, about earning the Navy Cross, about holding Marcus Williams as he died, about practicing his speech for weeks because he wanted to honor his friend properly, about standing at that podium and being told his service was fake, his uniform fraudulent, his medal stolen. "I spent 26 years serving this country," Robert told the jury, his voice breaking. "I earned my decorations in combat. I buried friends whose names are on those walls outside that pavilion. And on Memorial Day, while trying to honor them, I was accused of being a fraud. In front of 200 people. While wearing my friend's memory on my chest." The mayor testified about the call, about Morrison's refusal to stand down, about the director's fury. The director himself testified, unprecedented, about policy violations, about the lack of investigation, about how Morrison had acted on assumption rather than evidence. Veterans testified about what it felt like to watch one of their own being questioned, about the insult to every person who'd worn the uniform. Expert witnesses testified about racial profiling, about how black veterans face unique challenges having their service recognized, about the assumption that drives people to question whether someone looks like they could have earned their decorations. The defense tried to argue Morrison had been acting on reasonable suspicion, but the prosecution destroyed it. What reasonable suspicion? A decorated veteran, invited by the mayor, speaking at an official ceremony, in dress uniform, with medals matching public records. The only suspicious thing was the color of Robert's skin and Morrison's assumption that a black man couldn't have earned a Navy Cross. The jury deliberated 14 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The damages phase took 5 more days. Medical records showing Robert's increased blood pressure, anxiety, depression. Testimony from his daughter about his nightmares returning for the first time in decades. expert testimony about the specific trauma of having your military service questioned publicly. Then punitive damages. The jury wanted to send a message about Memorial Day, about veterans, about the cost of questioning service based on appearance. The damages, $22.6 million total. $4.1 million compensatory for emotional distress, humiliation, and medical treatment. $18.5 million punitive, calculated to ensure every federal agent thinks twice before interrupting a veteran's Memorial Day speech. Morrison was terminated. Crawford, who tried to stop him but failed to prevent it, was suspended for 6 months and demoted. The director personally apologized to Robert in a letter that became part of the settlement. New protocols were implemented. Mandatory verification before any approach to someone in military uniform, prohibition on interrupting veteran ceremonies, specific training on recognizing and respecting military service regardless of the service member's race. Robert used part of his settlement to establish a scholarship for children of fallen service members. He continued speaking at veterans events, though he never returned to that particular cemetery, the memory too painful. The 12 videos from that Memorial Day are still online, used in federal law enforcement training as an example of how prejudice overrides evidence, how assumptions about who looks like a hero lead to devastating mistakes. Years later, asked if the settlement felt like justice, Robert's answer was measured. The money will help families of fallen service members get educated. That matters. The policy changes might prevent this from happening to someone else. That matters too. But justice would have been being allowed to finish my 8-minute speech about my friend Marcus without being questioned about whether I earned the right to speak. What we got was accountability after humiliation. It's better than nothing, but Marcus deserved better. Every fallen service member deserves better than their memory being honored by someone whose service gets questioned mid-speech. Should federal agents face automatic penalties for questioning veterans' service during Memorial Day ceremonies? Comment below. Because what happened to Robert Hayes wasn't about security or verification. It was about an agent who saw a black veteran in dress uniform and couldn't believe the medals were real. And it took $22.6 million to teach the Department of Homeland Security that Memorial Day means something. Military service deserves respect, and Navy Cross recipients shouldn't have to prove themselves to anyone. If you believe veterans deserve honor without harassment, subscribe. Tomorrow we cover another case where someone's assumptions met someone's service record and lost spectacularly.